It was Halloween night, and 12-year-old Billy was excited. He'd been planning his costume for weeks, and he was finally ready to show it off. He was dressed as a monster, with a full-face mask and a long, tattered cloak. Billy went outside and joined his friends, who were all dressed up in their own costumes. They went up and down the street, trick-or-treating at all the houses. Billy got a lot of candy, and he was having a great time. After a while, Billy and his friends decided to take a shortcut through the woods. They had heard stories about a haunted house in the woods, but they didn't believe them. They thought it would be fun to explore the house on Halloween night. Billy and his friends walked through the woods for a while until they finally came to the house. It was old and dilapidated, with boarded-up windows and a sagging roof. The yard was overgrown with weeds, and there was a strange silence in the air. Billy and his friends hesitated for a moment, but then they decided to go inside. They found a broken window and climbed through it. The inside of the house was just as spooky as the outside. The furniture was covered in dust sheets, and the air was thick with the smell of mold. Billy and his friends explored the house room by room. They found nothing out of the ordinary until they came to the basement. The basement was dark and damp, and there was a strange noise coming from the corner. Billy and his friends slowly approached the corner. They could see a faint light coming from behind a stack of boxes. Billy reached out and moved the boxes aside. Behind the boxes was a small door. Billy tried the doorknob and it turned. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. His friends followed close behind him. The room was small and dark, with only a single candle providing light. In the center of the room was a table, and on the table was a book. Billy approached the table and picked up the book. It was old and worn, and the cover was made of leather. On the cover was a symbol that Billy didn't recognize. Billy opened the book and began to read. The book was written in a language that Billy didn't understand, but he could tell that it was something evil. As Billy read, the room began to get colder and darker. The candle flickered and went out. Billy was suddenly plunged into darkness. Billy could hear his friends screaming behind him, but he couldn't see them. He tried to move, but he was frozen in place. Billy felt something brush against his cheek. It was cold and slimy. Billy screamed, but no sound came out. Billy felt something wrap around his neck. It was tight, and it was getting tighter. Billy couldn't breathe. He was going to die. Suddenly, the darkness was pierced by a bright light. The light grew brighter and brighter until Billy had to close his eyes. When Billy opened his eyes again, he was back in the woods. He was alone. Billy ran all the way home. He didn't stop running until he burst through his front door. Billy's parents were worried about him. They had been looking for him all night. Billy told them what had happened, but they didn't believe him. They thought he had just been scared. The next day, Billy went back to the woods to find the house, but it was gone. There was no sign that it had ever been there. Billy never told anyone else what happened that night. He knew that no one would believe him, but he knew that what he had seen was real. Billy never forgot the haunted house in the woods. He would have nightmares about it for years to come. One night, Billy was having a nightmare about the haunted house. He was in the basement, reading the book. He could feel the cold, slimy hand on his cheek. He could feel the cord tightening around his neck. Billy woke up with a start. He was sweaty and breathing heavily. He looked around his room, but everything was normal. Billy tried to go back to sleep, but he couldn't. He kept thinking about the haunted house. He kept thinking about the book. Billy got out of bed and went to his desk. He opened the drawer and took out the book. It was the same book that he had seen in the haunted house. Billy opened the book and began to read. He didn't know why he was doing it. He knew it was dangerous, but he couldn't help himself. As Billy read, the room began to get colder and darker. The candle flickered and went out. Billy was suddenly plunged into darkness and he was gone.